Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thank you so much for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. We're taking a quick look at some important levels here for Bitcoin, specifically the macro structure, but also some CME gaps that are forming in both directions on majority of the coins that we cover here. So double checking that and a few other things. Specifically though, once again, the macro structure and kind of some liquidation ranges here that are due to get hit pretty hard soon. So be sure to stick around. We got a good one today. Let's take a look. All right, folks, before we jump into the back-end data, just quickly want to ask you to hit the like button, comment below if you get a chance. Really appreciate you doing that. Help the algorithm out and help the channel so I can continue to bring this awesome content to you here. Now, speaking of awesome content, Bitcoin's on the run right now, okay? We got a pretty significant buy order here from the whales, essentially. If we take a look here at our premium signals group, there's basically a notification. We saw 584 million in 14 minutes, 585 in 14 minutes. So that's a pretty big chunk of change they're getting purchased at one time, right? Good news is, of course, we're securing some profits. We are long or heavy in longs. We have 3, maybe 4 longs open at the moment, and we're looking pretty solid there. But the whole point of me showing that to you is that we're seeing a lot of liquidation to the upside getting swept here, right? There's also a CME gap above the price, which we'll look at here shortly. But just to clarify, just before we go any further here, I just want to touch on the fact that with our order blocks, we have a really big sell order at 104.4K. That leads me to believe that we're going to see some slowing pressure in the mid to upper 104K range, partially because we have liquidation up there that's going to be probably continue to push, but that's also right where our CME gap is at too. So it's interesting coincidence that always tends to happen where the CME gaps get filled and the price action turns around. I'm not expecting the price to drop, don't get me wrong, but I think we're more likely than not going to see 104.5 as a close approximate here. Part of that is because of all this liquidation on the upside. I mean, you look at this, there's just a chunk of change right there upwards about 106K. Now, we talked about this previously with what 106K range. That level is super, super heavy with liquidation. Okay, so that's a big chunk right there. So we'll touch on that here in just a moment, but let's quickly look at the 30-day time frame and see there's once again more liquidation above the price. Shorts are getting too heavy. We're starting to break our descending trends, and it's looking more likely the price is going to continue to run to the upside here for Bitcoin. We can see from a liquidation standpoint, there is roughly a 2.5 to 1 ratio for shorts versus long, and Ethereum's actually rocking and rolling right now. We're looking at a 3 to 1 ratio, almost just under for Ethereum as well. So Bitcoin and Ethereum taking the front run here. They're both front runners for the moment. Quickly to note, we're still in a fearish type of market here, which is generally good. That's when you wanted to consider buying. I'm not telling you to put your entire bag in to a spot or put buy as much spot as you can, but you should have been averaging in to the price points because we're hitting a lot of bottoms here locally, and I've been talking about that over the last few days. So just some friendly advice. Don't FOMO in per se, but make sure that you have added to some of your spot bags is probably a good consideration. Now, taking a look at liquidation. We can see open interest first on the right-hand side, heavy base volume at between 99 and 101K. All right, so that does incentivize the price to bounce off that level because that's a solid support range, right? So there's tons of interest, people buying at the $100,000 range as an average. We can see liquidation delta has since shifted over the last couple of days here, of course. Ever since Friday, in truth, we can see the price action looking at about 6 billion in longs versus shorts. So people are more long than short this weekend, which makes sense. We're starting to see that bottoming pressure. And obviously, as we can see, liquidation upwards about 106K here. I think 106K seems like a distinct probability in the relative near future. It may not happen today. It's a low volume weekend, folks. I mean, that's just generally the par for the course, but it's something to be mindful of nonetheless. Now, looking at the chart itself, the 4-hour time frame, we can see here that we are testing our descending trend line. It doesn't mean that we just go balls to the wall and we take a bunch of longs, but it does imply that there's more sense and security there now that this lower fair value gap has been filled with this previous hike up, and then of course CME gaps as well. Let's talk about that, just so you kind of understand where we're at now. CME gaps here, basically CME futures closed at 104.1K on Friday. So at this point, the price action is close to that range, is like in the upper 103K range. So we can presume that gap is getting filled and or will be filled depending on where we close today. All right. As far as Ethereum is concerned, this is red because it's in the opposite. Ethereum's above the closure on Friday, therefore reinforcing the possibility of a pullback. Inverse as well here, of course, for Solana, where the current price point roughly 160, 162, right in that range. And we saw CME futures close at about 164, 165. So Solana and Bitcoin should continue to progress a little higher. ETH could pull back because it's overextended. That's kind of the general consensus there. We'll take a look at the other coins here in just a moment. But from a descending trend type of scenario here, we can see the overall sentiment is that we're remaining above the 20-day SMA. We still have yet to surpass the 50. We have broken through 50 in the RSI, which is generally a very, very bullish sign. And we can see stochastic swinging up for once more the second time, carrying more weight than the first. As per usual, you retest this level here, 103.3. We talked about the S-Day being a significant local resistance. There's a good chance that that will be broken if it's retested, which we just saw happen. Right. So there's some good stuff there, mostly forming here for Bitcoin. I'm not going to start to say that we're in a position where we're breaking bullish by any stretch, but we're starting to see that momentum shift happen, and that's usually a good starting point, right? So I'm sure you're going to see a bunch of people on social media talking about how we're back on track. It's a bull run. Altcoin season is nigh. All these crazy, stupid things. I want to just kind of talk some logic into your mind here and just recognize that we're still fairly low in our market cap for altcoin season index, or just altcoins in general. We're at like 1.42 trillion today. That's a lot, of course, but 1.5 is usually that catalyst that gives us more emphasis or oomph in the right direction. We're not quite there yet. Most altcoins are still underperforming versus Bitcoin. All that said, majority of altcoins are also breaking their descending trend lines, so we got to be mindful. Short-term continuations higher makes sense. But from a macro perspective, folks, altcoin season I think is a thing of the past now that we have big money involved, right? They're going to continue to suppress the price. They're going to push the price in the direction they see fit. They're always going to continue to secure profits, while the rest of us are just kind of stuck sitting on our thumbs, right? I say the rest of us, that's mostly everyone else. Our community secures profit, right? I mean, you saw some of our profit here, 57% for ETH. We are long on AVAX and ADA, both in profit currently. Dogwoof at 48%, SUI 68. These are all longs here taken locally in the recent range, okay? Just again, some friendly advice, be careful shorting the bottom while the price could continue lower and we're still in somewhat of a bearish rectangle pattern that could still play out. I'm not proposing that we're just back on track, but play the ranges right now. That's basically where we're at. We got a low range of 100,000, upper range 104K. We break 104, we're more likely to progress towards that 105.5 to 107.5K resistance range. All that said, daily time frame isn't bullish by any stretch, but we're seeing some good early signs of reversal or momentum shift, and the 4-hour time frame is kind of just indicating that that is actually present. We're seeing that on lower time frames. So once more, it's a weekend, folks. It's not to be trusted in a lot of ways, but for the most part, everything leading into this leads me to believe that we're starting to bottom out, and ideally here, I mean, as you can kind of see, we're establishing higher lows here so far. The progression is more likely to break higher because of that. Right. So generally speaking, when you average in the center point of the range, it's more likely to break to the upside because of that. Okay. All right. So some good stuff here. I think overall Bitcoin looks pretty solid. Once again, weekend, it comes with a disclosure or disclaimer rather. Don't trust, not to be trusted. It's a weekend. All right. So keep that in the back of your mind there when you're trading today. All right, folks, let's take a look at some altcoins next. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, folks, so go ahead and start off with Ethereum first. Just to double check to kind of give you some clarification, we talked about this being a local resistance here, but with that cup and handle type of pattern that we saw playing out, it's inevitable for this coin to have broken. So there is a reason why we left our ETH long position open, secured another 57% there for some, or just an additional small percentage of extra profit for us based on that little position being left available. Either way, fair value gap below the price, we got to be mindful of that. But now that we've broken above this local resistance at 34.50, there's a solid chance we're going to continue higher. Let's see see if there's anything on back end kind of confirms that. First of all, 3,500 is that area of open interest. Same thing with 3,540. So we're kind of in that open interest range right now. So I would expect some consolidation in this range before the next leg up. And the best strategy for situations like this is to see that local range of 3,450, see how that retests first before you consider a long. I know it sounds crazy because the price could continue to run. You'll miss an opportunity, but you're better off waiting for a better opportunity than you are waiting for trying to force a bad opportunity, right? And we don't know if ETH is going to continue to run. It really requires Bitcoin to do so first, right? And if Bitcoin slows down now that CME gap's filled, and that order at about what I think was 104.4K for that order block, that gets filled, the price could pull back. I think we're probably going to see some tapering effect here on some altcoins today, just based on the simple fact that we have a lot of volume that flowed in earlier this morning. All that being said, liquidation delta is at 6 billion. That's generally favorable. You don't want to consider shorting this coin. I know a lot of folks just love trying to short overextensions, but you can get lucky for quite a while, and then eventually your luck runs out because these trends just keep pushing higher. All that said, tons of liquidation on the upside, upwards of about 4,000. I mean, it's spread out, of course, but heavy concentration is 3,600. That's the closest area of liquidation. So looking at the 4-hour time frame, once again, we've broken our descending trend line. We're testing the 50-day SMA. We're over 50 on the RSI. Stochastic swinging up for the second time. MACD is converging. Those are all very, very favorable signs. Not things you want to kind of try to short into. We can see the 200-day SMA still kind of holding like a champ here at 3,400 roughly for that current range. And then, of course, we can see the money flow index, while it's tapering off a little bit here, it's still above the RSI, and that's generally a favorable sign. So we like high MFI or MFI above the RSI. That's usually a good shift in momentum potential. That's exactly why we took our trade a few days ago, because the MFI has been still remaining consistently above the RSI. Once more, the inverse applies too as well for shorts if you see that shift in momentum. All right, so at this point, looking pretty solid in the overall sense. MACD is trying to converge, but still a little early and premature, but moving towards something positive here. So I think ETH is more likely to hit $3,600 to $3,800 range before it were to try to retest this local bottom about $3,300, $3,200. So those are my thoughts. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? Let's go ahead and take a look here at Solana next. Starting off with the backend data for Solana, the quick and easy way to understand it is 160 is that local support, 155 secondary to that. We also have resistance at 165, but you can see we've retested that level multiple times. So we're going to talk about why that level should break here soon, and that we are kind of forming a nice, awesome little bullish type of pattern. Furthermore, liquidation delta is at 1 billion, and obviously we take a look at liquidation in the back end, 165 to 169 as a rough estimate is a super big chunk of liquidation. We got a good 2 to 3 billion, maybe a little bit more in that range. Okay, so ultimately, some incentive to see the price action break higher. Keep in mind, though, from a macro perspective, larger timeframes, even smaller timeframes, we haven't broken our descending trend yet. Right, so this is one of those coins that's still very much lagging behind. I do think it'll continue to progress higher under the impression Bitcoin doesn't pull back super hard. All that said, though, we look at some key indicators here. Minus stochastic swinging up, the MACD on the daily here, everything's not really looking super favorable for this coin. We're also seeing a strong divergence here too as well at about 180. So if the price does break out, please secure profits between now and 180 because we have some significant resistance in that range, more specifically 175. I've talked about that being a good area to consider shorting just because the previous lows should work as new highs, right? So ideally, we're going to see something along these lines in the next few days for this coin. Granted, things can totally change in 24 hours or less, okay? That's why you consistently watch these videos, consistently reevaluate, and make sure you know what you're doing before you get into the trade. What I mean by that is, what's Bitcoin doing? How is it performing? If Bitcoin starts to rally, SUI is going to, Solana, SUI, XRP, all the coins that we cover here, they're all going to perform very well versus Bitcoin. The majority of them are very good front runners for the rest of the market. All that said, though, Solana here, still 4-hour time frame, not looking phenomenal. We're over the 20-day SMA, which is nice. We're maintaining well above our supports at 159, 158. So the truth is, the more time we spend in this range, the better off we're going to be. But I still don't see anything phenomenal here. However, we are back up over 50 on the RSI. There's slightly more bullish signs in the lower timeframes than bearish. Okay, it's just this price action doesn't interest me to want to try to consider a trade. If I were to take a trade of this coin, I'd be forcing a trade, and that's generally not what you want to do. Once again, these are my thoughts and my opinions. If you are feeling different, feel free to comment below. If you feel different because of how you feel, right? Because you're emotionally attached to this coin, you're totally doing it wrong. Just some friendly advice. I would highly recommend disassociating yourself emotionally to any kind of coin, favorite or not favorite. It's just ridiculous to factor that in. Now you can have favorite coins to trade, right? Because you like their price action, but if the coin, just because its ecosystem is awesome and some other influencers promoting XYZ and all that, that's not a reason to attach yourself to trade a coin, begrudgingly because it's doing, X, it's just dumb. Okay. Anyways, conversation for another day. I have to reiterate that because I get a lot of traders coming over to my community that are getting destroyed by LA wave theorists and all these other emotional idiots online. those who just regurgitate the same old crap every day. The truth is, trading is dynamic, and it's got to be different every single time you evaluate. And you cannot take your measly emotions and factor them in. That's it. Simple as that. All right. Now I know we're emotional beings. It's difficult to disassociate emotion with trading because it's your money, right? You work hard for it. So, anyways, I don't fault you for feeling that way. Just know that it's not what you want to be doing if you can. Okay, so SUI, moving on. Back-end data here looking pretty solid for SUI. I'm starting to believe that this would be a good coin to consider a long position with. The main reason why, open interest is super heavy. Liquidation delta has since shifted gears. We're seeing pretty good bullish behavior. There's a tremendous amount of liquidation above the price, above 220, 240, 250. Those are all super incentivizing prices. Another thing I love here is the price action on the actual chart. So in other words, we got our previous high range here of 205 that has since been retested as a new low, right? So once again, if we didn't have a SUI trade open, maybe I might even consider a second one. I'm definitely leaning more towards the price going higher than lower here. This is a pretty awesome little structure. Generally speaking, you see these kind of things break out, right? So for the most part, I like what I see here from a technical standpoint and the back-end data, but there's no doubt that the daily time frame is still quite poor. There's nothing here really outside of a MACD convergence that's telling us that we should go higher. Now, a MACD convergence is nice on the daily time frame, generally speaking, but we have tons of resistance above us. So I want you to be mindful that if you do take a long, which even though I'm still leaning towards taking a long versus a short, there's still inherently a lot of risk or a lot of resistance above the price. So let's try to identify that really quick. We can touch on the fib levels. Here, let's look at the 4 hours, a little easier to see. We can look at the fib levels here, of course, and just recognize the halfway mark is about 225. That's generally a place in which we start to see the price action slow down, not because it's just a wonderful 0.5 fib level or an Elliott wave theory. It's because what goes down must come up, and usually when it comes back up, it's roughly that halfway point that things start to slow down. Right? That's just kind of generally a concept. So even though we're consolidating nicely here, just below our previous low, that's going to be the current resistance, 220. I've talked about that. Once we break 220, though, I do think it's more likely, or we are more likely to see the 230 to 240 range, not just based on the current price action, but mainly because there's just a tremendous amount of liquidation there. So that's more of an incentivizing factor to me than a wonderful Fibonacci retracement level that just so happens to be a consistent number in nature, right? Nature doesn't belong in trading. You got to understand that. People that analyze charts, they have a tendency of being very superstitious, and honestly, look at these levels and these numbers all day long. You're going to find more consistency in previous support and resistance levels being retested and trend lines being broken, and specifically liquidation as well, outside of just these a couple of fib levels, right? They're predictive indicators, are not to be trusted. So just friendly advice, take them with a grain of salt. If there's confluence in those ranges, great. If that's all you have to go on, you're doing it wrong, right? Shooting in the dark doesn't really help you too much when you're trading. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. Okay, so taking a look here at the backend data for XRP, quickly to recognize, we want to understand solid amount of open interest below the price. I talked about this coin being fairly bullish in its current range, looking pretty strong, building a good foundation of volume. We can also see liquidation long delta super high right now. That's a very, very good sign. And of course, there's more liquidation on the upside than the downside. So most coins are starting to kind of have this same narrative, right? Where we're starting to see a bullish structure here. Although it's a weekend, it's still, it can be difficult to trust. There's still a lot of liquidation above the price. And the same thing can be said as well, too, with the structures here with the lower time frames. We're starting to see these descending trend line breaks. Now, this hasn't broken yet. As you can tell, we're still stuck on this descending type of trend. However, we're seeing a shift in momentum here. RSI is starting to increase, stochastic swinging up for the second time, MACD still converging, and albeit low volume on a weekend, right? Hard to trust that. The whole week is averaged pretty nicely into this range. But there's no doubt daily time frame sucks, and this is pretty much the same thing for all coins here. All right, we're still under a descending trend line. We're in a position right now where the point of control is 235. That's basically the current range, right? Ever since we've been in the 205 to 270 range, we've seen the most amount of volume at 235. We're right there at that level. Once we break that level, that would also put us above the descending trend line and more likely our likelihood or propensity to continue higher. There's a pretty solid amount of fair value gap above the price at 247, and then our previous high, which I can go ahead and update that. It's not like a super significant number of like 250, right? So I would speculate here that we're going to see a 247 to 250 range for XRP when we can break and close above this 235 level. All right, that's kind of the short term. But the macro structure here, folks, still, you got to recognize that this resistance range between 270 and 275 is still very solid. It was retested only once so far and rejected, but that was a super, super solid amount of support before it became a resistance, right? So we got to presume that 270 is going to be the local high, right? It's kind of general concept there. So we'll talk more about that later as we get closer if we were to, but for the most part, just some areas of interest to pay attention to. All right, that's what I got there, folks. Hope you liked it. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to comment below and let me know what you're thinking here. Make sure you check out Bitunix too, folks. Phenomenal exchange, no KYC or VPN required. We've been using them for over 2 years now, and they have monthly promotionals, basically easy rewards, right? So if you use my link to register, you're always eligible for those in future. If you have used if you register with them without using my link, just send me a message. I can get you on board. Okay, simple as that. Either way, I hope to hear from you soon. Have a good rest of your day. We'll look forward to the next one. Take care.